I have often written that Sherlock Holmes possessed an intellect far removed from ordinary men, but there are moments, rare and unsettling, when I realized that he also possessed something far more troubling, the ability to see the end of a story long before the first word was spoken. This case was one of them. The murder of Sir Alistair Crowe appeared, at first glance, to be a most ordinary crime. A wealthy industrialist found dead in his locked study, a gunshot wound to the chest, no sign of forced entry, no weapon recovered. Scotland Yard arrived in predictable confusion, and as usual, Holmes was summoned with great urgency and little dignity. What disturbed me was not the crime itself, but Holmes's demeanor. From the moment we arrived at Crowe Manor, Sherlock Holmes behaved not like a man beginning an investigation, but like a man merely confirming a conclusion already reached. Sir Alistair Crowe was discovered seated in his leather armchair, his head tilted slightly to the left, his eyes half open as if caught between thought and sleep. The study was immaculate, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass, no struggle. Inspector Lestrade paced the room like a hound that had lost its scent. "Locked from the inside," he muttered, "windows bolted, servants accounted for, no visitor entered the house after dusk." Holmes stood silently near the fireplace, his fingers pressed together, his gaze unfocused. I bent closer to the body. "Gunshot wound, close range," I said, "yet no weapon." "Indeed," Holmes replied absently, "a fascinating absence." Lestrade scoffed. "Absence doesn't pull a trigger, Holmes." Holmes smiled faintly, the kind of smile I had learned to fear. "No," he said, "but people often do, without ever being present." I assumed it was one of his metaphors. I was wrong. The obvious suspects. The household produced the usual cast of suspects. Edmund Crowe, the nephew, burdened with debt and a thinly veiled resentment. Mrs. Crowe, the widow, distant and composed to the point of suspicion. Thomas Hale, the secretary, who knew every detail of Sir Alistair's affairs. Margaret Finch, the housekeeper, loyal yet strangely nervous. Each was questioned, each denied involvement, each, I believed, hid something. Holmes questioned them gently, almost lazily, asking about matters that seemed irrelevant: the timing of dinner, the placement of candles, the temperature of the room. At one point, I pulled him aside. "I'm not pressing them," I whispered. "Any one of them could have done it." He glanced at me with mild curiosity. "Could they?" he asked. That was the first moment I felt the faint chill of realization that Holmes was not searching for a killer among them. He was certain none of them were. The mystery deepened when the coroner confirmed the bullet had been fired from a revolver that had not belonged to Sir Alistair. "No weapon in the house matches the caliber," Lestrade said. "It must have been removed." "Or never brought," Holmes replied. That night, back at Baker Street, I confronted him. "You're withholding something," I said. "You know more than you're telling." Holmes poured himself tea, unbothered. "My dear Watson," he said, "tell me, can a man kill without touching a weapon?" "Unless you're suggesting poison or coercion, no," I replied. He stirred his tea slowly. "What if the weapon obeyed someone who was not present?" I laughed, despite myself. "That's nonsense." The mystery deepened when the coroner confirmed the bullet had been fired from a revolver that had not belonged to Sir Alistair. "No weapon in the house matches the caliber," Lestrade said. "It must have been removed." "Or never brought," Holmes replied. The breakthrough, as it often does, came from a detail so small I had dismissed it entirely. Sir Alistair Crowe had been alone in his study. The servants heard the gunshot. They broke down the door within moments. The body was already slumped. But Holmes had noticed something else: the position of the chair. It had been turned slightly, just enough to face the fireplace, not the desk. A man shot unexpectedly does not adjust his chair, Holmes said quietly, examining the floor marks. You mean he expected it? I asked. No, Holmes replied. He caused it. The answer lay not in the house, but miles away. Sir Alistair Crowe had recently invested in a private experimental workshop run by a man named Victor Harlan, a disgraced engineer dismissed years earlier for unethical inventions. Holmes had visited Harlan before we ever set foot in Crowe Manor. That was the truth I only learned later. Harlan had designed a prototype device, an experimental mechanism capable of firing a weapon remotely through a timed pressure system disguised as a decorative mantel ornament. Sir Alistair, fascinated by innovation and arrogance in equal measure, had installed the device himself. He believed he controlled it. He did not. Harlan, dismissed and ruined by Crowe years earlier, had calibrated the device to respond to a delayed trigger, a sequence initiated hours before the murder from another location entirely. The shot was fired by a machine. The murder was committed by a man who was never there. Holmes's silence. Lestrade was furious when the truth emerged. No witnesses, no presence, no weapon in hand, he shouted. How do we charge him? Holmes merely shrugged. With evidence, he said. The workshop blueprints, the modified trigger, the financial correspondence, all damning. Harlan was arrested 2 days later, stunned that Holmes had anticipated his method from the beginning. That evening, I finally confronted my friend. You knew, I said quietly, from the moment we arrived, you knew none of them were guilty. Holmes poured himself tea, unbothered. My dear Watson, he said, tell me, can a man kill without touching a weapon? As I write this now, what troubles me most is not the brilliance of the crime, nor even the cruelty of it. It is this. Sherlock Holmes knew the murderer before the victim was fully examined. He knew the killer had never been present. He knew the solution, and yet chose to walk the long road, letting others believe in simpler evils. Perhaps that is his greatest talent, or perhaps it is his greatest flaw. For in solving crimes, Holmes does not merely expose murderers, he exposes the terrifying truth that distance does not absolve guilt, and that a man need not be present to destroy another's life. And I fear that in this modern age, such killers will only become more common.